The truth about the Nephilim. Why the official history ignores the giants. If the Nephilim never existed, why has practically every ancient civilization left records of giants? Why do disproportionate skeletons appear in archaeological excavations? And why do the world's greatest religious authorities still preserve texts that describe these beings so specifically? Well, the answers you are about to discover may completely change your understanding of the origins of humanity. Let us begin with documented facts. In Genesis 6:4, it is written, "There were giants in the earth in those days." It is not a metaphor. It is not an allegory. It is a direct record. But before we proceed, we need to understand the historical context where this story unfolds. We are talking about the period before the biblical flood, an era that practically all ancient cultures describe with impressive detail, even without contact between them. According to scholar and archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who excavated the site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, recent discoveries reveal that monumental structures were built by societies much older than we believed. His analyses show radiocarbon dates that place the construction back to 9600 before Christ. But the question that no one answers is, why would a hunter-gatherer society have built such sophisticated monumental temples? The implications suggest the presence of centralized leadership and advanced architectural knowledge. The biblical texts identify the Nephilim specifically. In Numbers 13:33, the spies that Moses sent to the Promised Land returned saying, "We saw the giants, and we were like grasshoppers before them." This description is not casual. The proportion described here is consistent with skeletal finds that archaeologists have discovered over decades. Skeletons with disproportionate bone structures, elongated skulls, and estimated height of 3, 4, up to 5 meters tall. According to archaeologist Robert Sepper, who compiled decades of research on anomalous anthropological finds, hundreds of gigantic skeletons were discovered in archaeological excavations on different continents. Femurs with lengths impossible for standard human physiology, jawbones with bone structure completely different from modern Homo sapiens, and dental frames that do not correspond to any known human species. Many of these finds were stored in museums without proper classification or simply disappeared from public records. It is not only in the biblical tradition that we find these accounts. Greek mythology describes the Titans as beings of colossal stature that preceded the era of the Olympian gods. Norse mythology speaks of the ice giants, primordial beings of monstrous size. The Sumerian texts, among the oldest of civilization, describe the Anunnaki as celestial beings of great stature that came to Earth. The Epic of Gilgamesh mentions giants that guarded the entrances to the world of the gods. According to Sumerologist Zechariah Sitchin, who dedicated his life to the study of Sumerian and Babylonian texts, there is evidence that the ancient Sumerians described extraterrestrial visitors that they called the Anunnaki. His writings detail how these beings would have genetically manipulated Homo erectus to create a race of workers. Sitchin identified in the Epic of Atrahasis specific references to creatures created to serve, with sufficient intelligence to obey, but strong body to work. These descriptions coincide remarkably with biblical accounts of the Nephilim. In South America, especially in Peru and Bolivia, we find indigenous traditions that describe gigantic beings called Huacapacha. The Incas possessed detailed accounts about races of giants that inhabited their territories before Incan civilization established itself. The Chimú Codex, a Peruvian historical document, describes specifically a people of giants that was hostile to smaller peoples. Multiple colonial reports by Spaniards who explored Peru mention gigantic skeletons found in caves and archaeological sites, with chroniclers like Pedro Cieza de León describing their dimensions in detail. According to Pedro Cieza de León, 16th century Spanish chronicler who wrote about his travels in South America, in his work, Chronicle of Peru, he documented finds of gigantic skeletons that local indigenous peoples attributed to an ancient race of giants. His descriptions are so specific and credible that modern historians continue referencing his work as a reliable primary source on colonial archaeological discoveries. But here is where the story becomes really interesting. In 1912, an extraordinary discovery was made in Wisconsin, in the United States. Multiple gigantic skeletons were unearthed from an ancient burial mound. The bones were so large that newspapers of the time published photos showing men holding femurs as if they were walking sticks. Reports indicated heights of up to 3.5 meters. The Smithsonian Institute, the institution that should have stored these discoveries, never allowed independent scientific analysis. The skeletons disappeared. They simply disappeared. No official explanation, no reason provided. This is not conspiracy theory. It is newspaper documentation. It is public record. It is history that was systematically removed from textbooks. According to independent archaeologist Brian Forst, who spent 2 decades investigating disappearing gigantic finds, there are clear patterns of evidence suppression. Official scientific institutions have systematically ignored, discarded, or concealed skeletons that do not fit the standard narrative of human evolution. Forst documented hundreds of cases where discoveries were reported in newspapers of the time but were never formally cataloged in scientific databases. The reason is simple. The confirmed existence of a gigantic humanoid race prior to known civilization would completely demolish the consensual theory of human evolution. It would challenge established chronologies. It would question the very origin of civilizations that we believe arose independently. It would threaten the foundations of how we understand our own history. Let us examine the physical evidence that remains. In 1933, in Egypt, near Giza, a sarcophagus was discovered that contained a humanoid skeleton whose bone structure suggested approximate height of 3 meters. Subsequent analyses indicated that the individual suffered from acromegalic gigantism, a hormonal condition that causes excessive growth. But is this merely an isolated case? No. Hundreds of skeletons with similar variations have been found at various archaeological sites. According to forensic anthropologist Michael A. Cremo, co-author of Forbidden Archaeology: Hidden History of the Human Race, there exists a systematic pattern in the scientific community of discarding anomalous evidence. Cremo documented dozens of discoveries of tools, artifacts, and human skeletal remains that appeared in geological formations much older than the accepted date for the emergence of Homo sapiens. His findings suggest that the history of humanity is much more complex and ancient than officially recognized. Let us talk about biology now. Is it possible that humanoid giants really existed? Biologically, yes. The history of evolution contains many examples of gigantism. The standard pattern for every species of primate is that its primitive members were larger. Gigantopithecus was a primate that reached 3 meters in height. There are documented fossils. It is not speculation. It is accepted scientific fact. So why is it so inconceivable that a giant version of Homo sapiens could have existed? Especially considering that just a few thousand years ago, humans were significantly taller than we are today. There is genetic evidence for this as well. According to Italian geneticist Guido Barbugiani, who studied genetic variation in ancestral human populations, recent discoveries of ancient DNA show that there is more genetic variation between human populations in ancient periods than currently. This means that our immediate ancestors had more biological diversity, including potential for extreme variations in height and body structure. The biblical texts do not describe only abstract giants. They name these beings. Goliath is the most famous, king of the cattle of Gad. The Bible provides precise measurements. His height was 6 cubits and a span, approximately 2.6 meters. But Goliath was not the greatest. 1 Samuel 21 mentions Og of Bashan, who reigned over cities and possessed an iron bed 9 cubits in length. If the measurement is accurate, Og would have been approximately 3.7 meters tall. But here's the critical factor that changes everything. The Bible does not describe these beings as aliens. It describes them as descendants of union between the sons of God and daughters of men. Genesis 6, 2-4 is absolutely clear. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair and took for themselves wives of all whom they chose. Then God said, "My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he is also flesh. His days shall be 120 years." There were giants in the earth in those days, after the sons of God united with the daughters of men and had children with them. They were the mighty men who were in antiquity, men of renown. This passage describes genetic hybridization. Specifically, it describes crossing between two different biological groups, resulting in hybrid offspring with characteristics of both parents. This description is completely consistent with scientific evidence of hybridization between different human species. According to geneticist David Reich, whose work mapped the genome of Neanderthals and Denisovans, we discovered that modern Homo sapiens carries Neanderthal genes. Approximately 2% of modern human DNA came from Neanderthals. This means that in the last 20,000 years, there has been crossing between our species and other human species. If this is true, why would it not be possible that there was also crossing with a gigantic humanoid race? The question becomes even more complex when we examine the consequences. First, Samuel 17 describes how the giants were gradually eliminated, first by David killing Goliath. Then, in subsequent campaigns, the biblical record shows that other giants were killed systematically. 2 Samuel 21 lists names of giants that were killed specifically. Og of Bashan was destroyed. His remnants were eliminated. The giant population was reduced until it disappeared. According to historian and archaeologist Thomas Thompson, who studied the chronology of biblical texts in relation to archaeological evidence of the ancient Levant, there is correspondence between periods of intense conflict recorded in the Bible and changes in archaeologically detectable populations. There is evidence of population displacement, genetic substitution, and even elimination of biological groups during periods that the Bible describes as conflict between different peoples. But what of those skeletons? Those disproportionate bones that do not appear in public museums? Well, some remain. Some were quietly reclassified. An elongated skull discovered in Peru was reclassified as bone pathology. Abnormally long femurs were categorized as anomalies. Jawbones that do not fit into any known anatomical classification were simply stored without identification. There is also the question of institutional silence. If hundreds of gigantic finds were really discovered during the last 200 years, why has no major scientific institution ever conducted systematic study? Why are there no scientific conferences dedicated to the phenomenon? Why are there no publications in respectable scientific journals examining this evidence? The answer may lie in what we call paradigmatic bias. When information does not fit the accepted model of how the world works, it is discarded. Not because the evidence is weak, but because it challenges the paradigm. According to historian of science Thomas Kuhn, in his fundamental work, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, normal science functions within an acceptable paradigm. When abnormalities arise, they are explained away or ignored until the amount of evidence becomes unbearable and a paradigm shift occurs. We are at that moment now. Contemporary genetic evidence suggests crossing between different human species, not only with Neanderthals, but potentially with other unknown hominin populations. According to geneticist Svante Pääbo, Nobel Prize winner for his work in ancient genomics, his research revealed that the modern human genome contains genetic contributions from multiple extinct human species, some of which are still being identified. What does this mean for the Nephilim? It means that the biblical story describes a biologically plausible phenomenon. The existence of a gigantic humanoid race that reproduced with Homo sapiens, resulting in genetic hybridization, is completely consistent with what we know about human evolution and patterns of crossing between closely related species. But there was a consequence. Numbers 13:33 describes the spies returning and saying that they saw the sons of Anak, giants. The account suggests that these beings represented an existential threat to the standard Homo sapiens population. They were stronger, taller, potentially easier to domesticate and control as a military force. If the Nephilim had maintained sufficient population, history would have been completely different. Modern Homo sapiens might have been enslaved or even extinct. According to anthropologist Richard Leakey, who dedicated his career to the study of human origins, in his interviews and writings, he suggested that the history of humanity is marked by periods of intense competition between different branches of the human family. The victory of Homo sapiens over other hominids was not inevitable. It was the result of specific circumstances, potentially including direct conflict and competition for the same resources. The extinction of the Nephilim may have been simply natural selection at work. A smaller population of larger beings requires proportionally more nutrition. During periods of scarcity, it would have been systematically disadvantageous compared to smaller populations of standard Homo sapiens that require less food. This, in combination with direct conflict recorded in the biblical narrative, would have resulted in gradual extinction. Still, the question persists. Why was the evidence systematically hidden? Why do scientific institutions not only ignore these finds, but actively suppress investigation? One answer may be simple. If the history of humanity includes an intelligent humanoid race that coexisted and reproduced with our ancestors, this completely rewrites the linear progress narrative that has defined our understanding of ourselves. It means that we are not the only type of human that is wise. It means that we did not evolve alone. It means that our history is more complex, more mysterious, and potentially darker than officially recognized. It means that questions about origin, purpose, and destiny need to be completely rethought. The Nephilim were not aliens. They were an extreme human population, hybrid, result of genetically distant encounter between two biological populations. Their body and strength made them formidable. Their intelligence made them dangerous. Their existence challenged the notion that Homo sapiens was unique, and perhaps that is the true reason why they were systematically eliminated from official history. Because their existence raises the most disturbing question. If we really coexisted and reproduced with a different race, what else about our history is hidden? What other evidence has been suppressed? What other humanoid populations may have existed, leaving only fragmented vestiges in ancient texts and bones in museums? The truth about the Nephilim is not that they never existed. It is that we are afraid to fully answer the questions that their existence raises, because they challenge everything about who we think we are.